Okay, let's jump right in. Right now, inside pretty much every big company, there's a bit of an AI Wild West happening. You've got employees grabbing new tools, developers spinning up new models, and all of this creates this invisible layer of risk. We're talking security, privacy, and yeah, your company's secret sauce. It's intellectual property. So the real question is, how do you get a handle on all this without killing all that great innovation?
And this quote right here, this is the heart of it. This is what this whole explainer is about. Good governance is what makes all those big abstract laws and regulations feel real. It's how you actually control what your teams are doing with AI, day in and day out. It's how you take that chaos and actually turn it into a real strategic advantage. So, how are we going to do that? We're going to break it down into 5 key levers you can pull. We'll start with your corporate policies, then look at the tools people are using, the good and the bad, the models you build on, the data you absolutely have to protect, and finally, the vendors you bring into your circle. Just think of this as the blueprint for making those rules real. All right, let's start with lever number 1, corporate policies. This is the bedrock. This is where you take huge, complex things like the EUA Act or GDPR, Europe's massive data privacy law, and you translate them into simple, clear rules that everyone in your company has to follow. Get this right, and everything else gets a whole lot easier.
A really solid program rests on 4 main pillars. You've got your acceptable use policy. That's for everybody. Then your development standard, which gives your engineers the rules of the road. The model risk policy is for your most critical AI systems. And finally, the data protection policy, which basically puts a big, strong fence around your most valuable information. Together, this is your AI rulebook. So a bunch of rules are great, but who's actually in charge of them? That's where a RACI matrix comes in. It stands for responsible, accountable, consulted, and informed. And having this clarity is absolutely crucial. As you can see, even though the CIO is ultimately accountable for the whole stack, it's a total team effort. The CISO is responsible for security, the data protection officer owns the privacy rules. This is what makes policy more than just paper. Okay, so policies are the foundation, but let's be real, rules on paper only get you so far. This brings us to our second lever, getting control over the actual tools people are using. This is where we see the clash between approved, sanctioned AI and the wild, risky world of shadow AI. And the difference here is, well, it's night and day. On one hand, you have sanctioned tools, like your company's official enterprise copilot. It's been vetted, it's monitored, and you have legal contracts in place protecting your data. On the other hand, you have shadow AI. That's your developer pasting confidential code into some free public tool. It's a wide open backdoor for your company's secrets to just walk right out. Not good.
So how do you deal with this? Well, there's a pretty straightforward 4-step playbook. First, you got to discover it's even happening, usually with some kind of monitoring. Then you have to decide, is this tool actually useful or just dangerous? If it's useful and you can make it safe, you onboard it and make it official. If not, you block it. And, this part is key, you retrain people on the safe tools they should be using.
And what's really interesting here is the division of labor. You can see the CISO is accountable for the techie part, actually finding the shadow AI. But that final business call on whether to block it or bring it into the fold, that accountability sits with the CIO. It's that partnership between security and IT that makes this whole thing work. Now, once you've decided which tools are okay, the very next question is, where do the AI models behind them actually live? And that brings us to our third lever, which is all about governing your architecture. This is really about that big strategic decision. Do we use public, shared AI models, or do we go with private, dedicated ones? Look, there's no single right answer here. It's all about a massive trade-off. Private models, they give you total control. It's your security, your logging, everything. That's perfect for sensitive, regulated data. But they're more expensive and complex. Public models are way easier and cheaper to get started with, but you give up a ton of that control. The choice really comes down to the data you're using and how much risk you're willing to take on. And here's how that decision should get made. The CIO is on the hook for the big picture architecture, but the CISO, they're accountable for setting those non-negotiable security standards. And check out that last row. The data protection officer is accountable for what might be the most important rule of all, deciding what kind of data is ever allowed to touch a public model. Getting that one decision right prevents so many headaches down the line. And that is the perfect segue into our fourth lever, the data itself. Let's be honest, in any AI system, the data is the crown jewel.
So protecting your most sensitive information is, without a doubt, one of the biggest governance challenges you're going to face. So when we say high-risk data, what are we actually talking about? Well, it falls into three main buckets. First, you've got PII and PHI. That's personal info and health info, stuff that's super heavily regulated. Second, there's your own secret business data, financials, source code, all that good stuff. And third, you have other regulated data, like credit card info. If an AI system is going to touch any of this, it needs Fort Knox level controls.
If you only remember one thing from this whole section, please make it this. This is the golden rule. It needs to be in your policies, it needs to be in your training, and it absolutely needs to be enforced by your tech. This one simple rule will prevent an entire category of absolute data disasters from ever happening.
Now, a rule is only as good as your ability to enforce it, and that takes, you guessed it, another partnership. The data protection officer is accountable for defining the rules, what counts as sensitive, but it's the CISO who's accountable for the technical enforcement. We're talking about tools like data loss prevention or DLP, which can literally act like a bouncer and stop sensitive data from going where it shouldn't.
All right, we've made it to our fifth and final lever. This one is all about looking beyond your own company walls. Because with AI, you are constantly relying on vendors and cloud services. So you have to manage your supply chain and know exactly where in the world your data is living.
Any smart organization runs every single new AI vendor through a tough process, a gauntlet really, before they get anywhere near your data. It starts with security, checking their certifications. Then, privacy and legal comb through their policies. This leads to signing really important legal docs like a data processing addendum, a DPA, that legally binds them to protect your data. Only after a vendor passes every single one of these checks do they get the green light. And a really critical piece of that whole review process is a concept called data sovereignty. Basically, it means that for some customers, especially in Europe or in the public sector, their data is legally required to stay inside a specific country or region. This isn't just a preference, it's often the law. And it has a massive impact on which vendors and cloud services you can even consider using.
So let's look at our final Rossi. It's clear that vetting vendors is a total team sport. The CIO owns the high-level strategy, sure, but the CISO and the DPO are directly accountable for the deep-dive security and privacy reviews. Think of them as the gatekeepers, making sure any new partner is up to your company's standards. Whew! Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground with these 5 different levers of control. So let's take a second and pull it all together and see how they create one single cohesive blueprint for your entire AI strategy. See how they all build on each other? Your policies set the rules of the game. Your sanctioned tools list enforces those rules. Your choice of models bakes your risk tolerance right into your tech stack. Your data rules determine what games you can even play. And your vendor controls define who you can play with. It all works together to create a framework that makes AI not just powerful, but also safe. And that brings us to the final, and I think the most important question you need to ask yourself. Is all of this governance stuff just a bureaucratic nightmare that slows everybody down, or is it a strategic enabler? When it's done right, it creates clear guardrails. And those guardrails give your teams the confidence to innovate and move fast because they know they're safe. The goal here isn't to hit the brakes, it's to build a better, safer race car so you can go faster than ever before.